Hello and welcome to week 2 of Pure Lifestyle. Hi Anthony,
Hello, Anna.
how are you?
I'm good. I'm good.
Good. Buzzing because it's Monday?
Yeah,
Yeah,
always.
always,
Always.
always. Good, good. Ooh, that was a
Wait,
horrible sound.
you got a creaky, what? A creaky mic?
Yeah, a creaky mic. Um, yeah, so today we talk about calories and energy balance and all those exciting things. So I thought it would be good to start with how we come up with your calorie allowance and your calorie number, and then discuss why it's important and yeah, delve a little deeper into what really matters. So if it's your calories during the day or if it's your calories over time that matter.
Yeah, because I think a good point on this is that everyone on the course has now gone through a bit of a self-assessment phase, and with that, they'll start to recognise probably their own habits and behaviours, where they're a little bit shocked about, or whether that be good or bad. I think in some cases, in a lot of cases, it's good.
Mm-hmm.
So then when we go in and we start to work out these calorie numbers, I think sometimes it can be a little bit overwhelming. So let us break down how we get to them numbers. So do you want to kind of chat through that and the detail around it?
I can do this. So
Brilliant.
what we do is we start with a basic estimation of your total daily energy expenditure, which is kind of just a fancy way of saying how many calories you need to maintain your current body weight, given your, but like the calculation really is given your current weight and how active you are during the day. So your weight and activity levels really give us a nice estimate of how much calories you need to maintain that weight, and thus how many calories we need to cut from that so that you start losing weight. Was that a really weird sound just then?
No, but I've got
No.
an alarm going off in the background and it seems
Oh,
to
I
happen
can't hear
every
that.
Monday.
That's fine.
Yeah.
Okay, so once we've come up with this number, and I think it's really important to emphasize here that it's an estimate. It's a
Yeah.
ballpark figure, and the fact that it is doesn't matter. So you
Mhm.
could go and try and be really tech savvy and use your Fitbit or your iWatch or whatever it is that you've got with technology. Again, there's so many errors that can creep in that it really doesn't matter. And I think a good example of this is that when we set your calorie targets, and not just us, but any sort of fat loss program you ever go on, they're never like 1562.
No.
They're always rounded up to a round number, because it really, 20 calories doesn't matter here nor there at the end of the day. Like when you're looking at the bigger picture of it, 20 calories can matter if it's every day, having a biscuit every day with your tea or something like that. Like these things can add up, but when we come to our bigger picture of this is your calorie target, that 20 calories difference, it isn't a huge impact. So what we do is we've got your total daily energy expenditure. Let's say to maintain your current body weight, you need 2,000 calories. To lose weight, we then want to take a chunk off that. Now, often people just opt for 500 calories off. I don't like doing this because for some people that's a little bit too much. For some people, you could afford to go a little bit more. So depending on a few factors, I'll take off 10 to 20% of your total daily energy expenditure. So let's say you're on 2,000 calories and we're taking off 20%, that leaves you 1,800 calories. That would be your goal. That would be your calorie goal, 1,800 calories. But, as Anthony is about to explain, this daily calorie goal isn't shouldn't have to be stuck to. What we really care about is your energy balance over time. That is what's going to dictate fat loss. So there are a number of ways that you can make your diet much more flexible by having that approach. And, the obvious one is taking a weekly allowance and splitting that up. So maybe during the week you can be very strict, and it's very easy for you to stick to 1,600 calories, which gives you more calories to play with on the weekend. Now, if over the week you're in an energy deficit, which you will be, then you will still lose the same amount of fat. And I think this is something that a lot of people wrongly sort of get caught up on, is that the energy balance sort of runs on a 24-hour clock, which is just not the case. You can like I've just said, your energy balance over time is what is going to dictate your fat loss.
Mm-hmm.
So if you eat more one day, you can simply account for it. I think that's the bit that people, again, another thing I see is someone will say, oh, I stuck to my calories 5 out of 7 days, so I should lose weight. No, you still have to account for the days that you go over. It's fine to go over, it's fine to eat more on days, but you then need to track what you have eaten over your calories and account for it during the rest of the week.
Yeah. And do you know what? I've got loads of different things kind of buzzing around my head at the minute for this, but I think the first thing is looking at how to track, and obviously a lot of people will be introduced to food diaries or MyFitnessPal, and probably the easiest way to track these days is MyFitnessPal. And something to emphasize from the off, and I'm sure your coaches have done that, is that we don't want you to do that forever. It's just a really good tool at the start to understand how much you consume, where you consume, and then potentially at what points you derail a little bit, and that's fine too. Something that Emma just touched on then is a lot of people will feel that they have stuck to and tried hard to stay under their calorie, or say hit their calorie allowance for the day, and then do it 5 out of 7 days, and the 2 days is normally at the weekend that they don't track, and so on. Something that to be really, really aware of, and you can probably be like quite clever with this, is that the majority of people will, and this is more or less everyone I've ever worked with, like thousands of clients, loads of people on Pure Lifestyle, when you start to self-assess, is most people will consume most of their calories at night or at the weekend. And that's completely fine. And I think people get so bogged down with the whole, when shall I eat? Should it be little and often? And that type of stuff, to a point where I actually removed it from the content of Pure Lifestyle this year, because it brought about the most amount of questions. And I wanted the PTs to really deliver and drive home this message, what we're discussing now, that, like, don't worry if, for example, you're the type of person who doesn't eat breakfast in the morning, then you've got the rest of the day to eat your calories. And if you've got more for at night, then happy days. If you've then saved more for the weekend, even better. And I think the best way I can kind of put this, and I don't know if it's the best analogy to do it, is to try and treat it like money, in a case of, like, you've got your allowance per day, and if you underspend, then you've got more for the next day. If you overspend, you save the day after. And that's kind of how you should go about it, in my opinion. And that's also good to view it if you are the type of person who overconsumes in calories at the weekend. I always tell the guys who do that to look at from starting their calories from a Friday to a Friday, and then if they've overconsumed a massive amount Friday, Saturday, Sunday, some of them will struggle on what we call like poverty calories, or whatever you want to call them, or some of them will be absolutely fine because they know Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday in work is manic, so they don't get much time to eat, and that's fine. So they've actually lived a little at the weekend, which shows that you can still lose weight and have a social life, which is what will happen. We discussed that in week 3 anyway. But that's kind of something I wanted to touch on and identify as well, that please don't get bogged down with when to eat, what to eat, and so on. Yes, it's not for now, but if we were to look at kind of consuming protein, then maybe look at having that as little and often as regular throughout the day to support your training. But right now, getting your head around this calorie thing is pretty key to get your head around, because at the end of the day, it matters the most when it comes to fat loss.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think the point to be made about like meal timing and when you eat your calories or how you divvy them up during the day or during the week is far more to do with behaviors than it is to do with physiology of energy balance. So, we can just take as a baseline that in terms of fat loss, when you eat does not matter. Now, that's not to say that in terms of behavior, that doesn't matter. So Anthony just said, like, most people eat most of their calories on the weekend or in the evenings. Now, knowing that allows you to either save calories for those times or acknowledge that they're going to be harder times to stick to your diet. So that's one of the reasons that, the sort of arbitrary rule of not eating after 6 p.m. or no carbs after 6 p.m. that works so well because most people overeat in the evening. They do very well during the day, and then it lets them down a bit during the evening. Now, I quite like that rule. I wouldn't set it for a weekend. I wouldn't be like, no, like very strict on the weekend. Like, I like people to have more calories to play with on the weekend. I think that's a very good idea to do, and I think for me anyway, it helps me to be more structured during the week anyway, because I'm not that sociable during the week. And, you know, having structured meal timings or just a more structured diet during the week helps me with productivity as well as, you know, being able to stick to my diet.
Yeah.
So I think that's an important point to make, that it's the behaviours around when you eat that are going to impact more than the calories that you're eating necessarily. And I really like the analogy of money as well. It just kind of like, it's an obvious thing. Like if you spend all your money on the weekend, then you're skint all week. Let's say you get paid weekly, you spend all your money Saturday, Sunday.
As stupid as it sounds, that's when the penny drops for members as well. They're like, for clients, right, you can actually treat it like that.
Yeah, and it's just such an easy way to do it. And like, yes, you can go into your quote unquote overdraft if you then pay it back by the end of the week. And on average, you're, you know, or if you want to be in a deficit, or you can save calories the same way that you could save money for the weekend. You know, would you really spend as much money on a weekday as you would on the weekend? No, probably not. Yeah, so that, I think that covers quite nicely splitting your calories over the week and what really matters when it comes to calories and energy balance. Yeah,
and I think something that we say a hell of a lot, and I think we direct this more so at personal trainers than we do general population or anyone trying to achieve fat loss, is like the whole kind of principle of weight loss is kind of the same for everyone, that if you want to lose weight or fat, then you need to be in a calorie deficit. But how to apply that is very much down to the individual, which is why it's so difficult sometimes to teach it generalized, like giving a general view of this is how you would do it. Because like we've just said, for the average person, some people don't even mind not having breakfast in the morning, probably go till 12 o'clock and have their lunch and then have their most of their calories throughout the day, which is kind of a smaller version of kind of intermittent fasting or whatever.
Yeah, but it is funny when people are like, oh, I'm intermittent fasting. It's like, no, you just didn't have your lunch until 11, like your breakfast until 11.
Yeah, but it's a view on kind of, that's how you would apply it for you. And then your weekends might look completely different. And it's like, what type of behaviors would you need to change to apply this deficit into your life? Like, we'd be completely wrong to turn around and say it must be this way, because it's going to be completely different for everyone. But one thing I wouldn't say is to get bogged down too much with the real big detail around it. It's just, there's your number, that's it. If you times it by 7, manage it over a week. If you do it for the day, that's fine. But as long as you stick to it over time, then you will lose weight. That's a fact. And if progress does stall, and this is something we talk about at week 6, and I learned this from you probably assess that from week 2 to week 4 or so on. If it does stall, don't be kind of downhearted from it. It's what you would do is then look at how accountable you've been in the detail you've done from a tracking point of view. Has your activity become any lower? Have you exercised as much? So there's lots of detail to it to take into account. And I suppose if the progress isn't going as fast as you want it to go, it's just check in with yourself now and again that it should be, or it can be, from 0 to £2 a week, depending on body weight. And that's kind of how you'd want it to be.
Yeah. And also note that the scales aren't actually a sensitive enough measure to measure like loss in body fat over short periods of time. So if you're not seeing weekly decreases, that's completely normal and actually inevitable. Like, we never see anyone decrease week on week. It just doesn't happen. And you know, fluctuations in weight are completely normal and you can't hide from them. They will happen. But if you know that you're sticking to your diet and you can really, you know, check yourself and be like, yes, I am actually sticking to this. I know I'm in a deficit. So this fluctuation must be either hormonal or some water retention.
Yeah.
So it's definitely not body fat if you have stuck to your diet.
Just on that, and I think it's key to bring up because it can be such a demotivator for people. I know we've touched on this loads of times before. And then females within their cycle, when would they be normally hold more weight in that cycle? I know it is dependent on the person, but I found throughout the years working with different females a consistent time in their cycle where I would potentially not let them step on the scales or not do their measurements and so on, because I'd normally do it at week 1 of their cycle compared to week 3 and so on. And I think it's something that we need to touch on, because you might be making great progress, then stall, and then even maybe jump on the scales and go 3 or 4 pound backwards again. So I just thought it'd be best for you to touch on that.
Some people have huge fluctuations, which will
I've noticed that recently.
Which can completely mask a whole month of fat loss.
Yeah.
So, if you can't be sort of rational, which I know sounds very easy, but it's not. A lot of people have an emotional attachment to the scales. They use it as their main marker of progress. So if if it's gone up, that's hugely demotivating. Even if you take a step back, you can be like, it probably is water retention due to hormonal fluctuations, but it's still, very hard to get that into your head. So when that normally happens, and again, it does vary person to person, but it's the week prior to your period. That's when you normally weigh the most, you're retaining the most water. Another point to make though, and I've just done a video on this, so it's fresh in my head, is that changes in glycogen stores, so carbohydrate stores in your muscle, and the water that comes alongside that can also have huge fluctuations on the scales. So an example is, let's say you had 500 grams of carbohydrates over the weekend. So let's say during the week you stuck to your calorie allowance, and generally people eat slightly less carbs if they're cutting calories or they're trying to be good on their diet. Just generally it's an easy thing to cut, and you want to keep carbohydrates high, and you want to keep good healthy fats in as well. So the first thing to go tends to be carbohydrates. So let's say that your muscle stores of carbohydrates are probably a bit depleted. On the weekend you've saved up some calories maybe, or maybe not, but you have higher carbohydrate diet on the weekend within your weekly calorie allowance. So you're still in a deficit at the end of the week. The point I'm going to make here is that, say you had 500 grams of carbohydrates, it takes 3 to 4 grams of water per 1 gram of carbohydrate to store carbohydrate as glycogen in your muscle. So if you eat 500 grams of carbohydrate, you could quite easily put on 2 kilograms without changing your body fat at all. So, we often see this, that people put on weight over the weekend and then they're disheartened because often people just weigh themselves on a Monday as well, which means they're only ever catching that peak of that weight fluctuation, which none of is fat. You haven't put on 2 kilograms of fat. To do that, you would have had to eat like in excess of 10,000 calories overnight, which just doesn't happen. I think the one thing that I want people to get away from this is that acute changes in weight, be it up or down, will not be fat. Because they simply physiologically cannot be. So in a way, a bit demoralizing if you're just starting pure lifestyle. I'm going to be totally honest with you. You lost 2 kilograms last week. That's not fat. A lot of that is water, and quite a lot of that's probably glycogen stores and the water that is stored with your carbohydrates. Now, that's not to say, you've not started the diet very well, but realistically, that won't be fat. If you lose or gain weight very quickly, it's not fat. You've not changed your body composition. It's just the water that you're storing. And sometimes maybe some food volume in your digestive tract.
Yeah, and that can work in 2 ways. I'm thinking about the mindset then now, or should I say, a person who would really see that as demotivating if they've gone the wrong way.
Well, I just had a client. Well, I say client. She's one of my best mates. She's trying to lose a bit of weight, and I've been helping her a little bit. And she's only been weighing herself on a Monday. And I didn't realise this. And she kept saying, like, I've not lost any weight, or I actually think I might be heavier than last week, blah, blah, blah. And it was exactly that. She then I said, weigh yourself on Friday. And she was absolutely buzzing because she's lost like 3 kilograms more than what she thought she had lost. And it's, it's quite amazing, the difference in that. And it can be hugely, she was pretty much like, I'm not going to keep doing this if I'm, cause she was making a huge amount of effort, completely sticking to her calories, exercising, everything, ticking all the boxes, and she couldn't see much or any weight loss. And it's because she was weighing herself on that fluctuation after the weekend.
And which is something I wanted to kind of bring up on this is, and might be a negative. But if you've gone through the first 2 weeks and you've potentially, let's say you took this on board, you've got to a Friday, the last 2 Fridays, and you've weighed yourself and you've not moved, and you feel you have made the changes that is expected of you from Pure Lifestyle or you've expected from yourself, the majority of the time, especially if you haven't lost water weight, it's something that you are doing. And I don't mean to kind of have a dig at people with that. I think sometimes they can blame the program or they can blame the coach, and it's 9 times out of 10, it'll have to come back to the person and go, it's potentially something. It might be that your menstrual cycle is at that time and you're just in your last 2 weeks of your cycle and you're holding more water, granted. But if it's not, and you haven't made progress, it's definitely something that you are not tracking or not doing enough of.
Yeah.
And I think it's something that you need to be aware of. And it might be something that you just need to bring up with a coach. And if that's the case, and I don't know, like there's something preventing you from doing, I don't know, tracking consistently. There's so many other ways of tracking your nutrition. Just because you can't track or you've not been doing it as consistently as you want, like there's so many different ways that you can do it and alternatives and adaptations. So you need to speak to your coach on that one.
Yeah, I think that's an important point as well, because not everyone likes tracking calories, and I don't. And the way I get around that is that I am very consistent with my diet. So during the week, my diet's quite boring. I eat basically the same things most days, give or take. Like I might change the lean protein source that's with, whatever I'm having. But I know roughly what I'm eating each day, but I don't track it at all. However, on the weekend, I might decide to track the weekend because maybe I'm going out for a few meals or my diet's a lot more varied. So I would, if you're someone who doesn't like tracking calories, I would say track your more varied days. And if you really don't want to track, you might decide to be a bit more like quote unquote boring, but consistent during the week. So have like more consistent meals. And then you'll know that during the week you're in a deficit, you're sticking to your diet. And then on the weekend, you might consider tracking because you're having a much more varied diet, and some things are way more calories than you would expect.
Yeah.
It's also much easier to sort of assess your diet if it's consistent as well. Like if I know I'm eating consistently the sort of same things, then I know that to lose weight I need to make a change to create a deficit. So whether that be, swapping rice for potatoes or cutting half my pasta serving and replacing it with salad or something, like, or just reducing my portion sizes or cutting out the extra coffee that I have, and whatever it might be, if it's consistent, then I know that I can change, like take in or out something. Whereas if you're just everywhere all the time, then you kind of do need to track, because where are you going to take those calories out? And it's so inconsistent every day. Some days you're up there, some days you're not. So yeah, if you don't want to track as much, I would say consistency is going to be your friend.
Yeah, and just on that, because we threw different types of macronutrients away, mainly protein and carbohydrates, people will probably upload, if they do, MyFitnessPal and start using it from this week. And it will give them the question of the kind of breakdown of ratios. And I think that would be a good place to kind of end this regards to how much should people have. And I know that's a really generic question at you, but I know a lot of the coaches will get that this week. Like, what should my percentage of protein, carbs and fats be? Does it matter? So I just thought I'd kind of open that up, because I know it does bug people. Like, I've got people in my online group when I got them at the start, and they were like, oh, but I want to lower my carbohydrates because I don't want as much because they bloat me. I'm like, okay, let's just have a look first. So yeah, I just thought I'd throw that at you.
Yeah, again, like we want this, the whole approach is a flexible approach. So it needs to be as flexible as possible. The one thing I would say is we want you to get in enough protein. There's numerous reasons for this. It will spare lean body mass. So that's what we want to maintain as your muscle. It will keep you fuller for longer. So if you're struggling to stick to your diet, it will reduce hunger levels. And there are benefits to eating it at every meal to stimulate your muscle protein synthesis response at every meal. Now that's going to sound a bit too sciencey and things. So really, if we're looking at basic recommendations, stick to your calories and build each of your meals around a protein source, and you kind of won't go far wrong. Now, on top of that, obviously what you eat matters. So get in a variety of fruit and veg, get in some whole grains, get in some good healthy fats, My go-tos are, I actually supplement with fish oils, but I also eat oily fish like most days as well, because I think that is like, yes, like a key. But I'm talking about like salmon, mackerel. If you're not a fish person, I would maybe recommend supplementing with fish oils. If not, olive oil is a great source of fat as well. So, but once you've sort of hit those things, the rest is up to you. You can design your diet in a way that you enjoy.
Okay, cool. Because people just get bogged down with the detail of what ratio it should be, because MyFitnessPal show me, I don't know, it kicks off with like, I think it kicks off with like 40, 40, 20, doesn't it? On it, more or less everyone. I can't remember. From a percentage ratio of 40% carbs, 40% fats, and then 20% protein. But then we're saying get high protein in. So what I normally have to do is change most of my protein targets for my group on MyFitnessPal anyway. And then with that, obviously carbs and fats come down with it. But on the most part, like, I think the one thing to take out of today's video is that once you have your calorie number, hit that daily, and then over time, and you'll lose weight. Don't get bogged down by detail. Don't worry about carbs and fats. And if you're going to worry about one more thing, it's protein.
Yeah, absolutely. And one thing I will say about fats is, if you're going to track and measure anything in a sort of anal way, do it with your fats, because they're more than double the calories per gram as carbohydrates and protein, and they're so easy to overeat. Yeah. And even if you're not meaning to. So, one person's spread of peanut butter could be double the calories to another person's spread of peanut butter, or whatever is tracked in MyFitnessPal. So it does seem annoying and pedantic, but if you are going to weigh out anything, then fats are what you should be focusing on.
Yeah, and normally if you're on the go a lot, grabbing a lot of food like I am, you'll find if you are tracking, most of the convenience food you grab on the go is higher in fat. Or for me anyway, I've noticed that. So like if I am on the go and I've not planned my meals and I'm grabbing stuff literally from wherever I can, train stations or whatever, I won't feel like I've had a hell of a lot of food volume in the day. So I'll feel hungry, but I've consumed just the same amount of calories as I did the day before when I planned and prepped my food and so on. So yeah,
I do find that when traveling, food volume is a bit of an issue, and it's part like you can do it, but it's just expensive for what it is. Because I resent paying £2 for like basically some chopped off lettuce leaves that, like a pre-made salad, which actually if you'd made yourself would have cost you like 20p. So then you just think, oh, I'll just not have the salad, but then your food volume drops and you're hungrier. So yeah, it is a hard. It's when you're traveling, food volume is harder to get without paying lots for basically crunchy water.
True. We've gone off on a tangent again.
We have. I'm sorry.
I know, it's fine. I reckon that's good though. I reckon we've got enough in this week.
I think that's a great discussion for this week. So thank you, and we will get back to you next week.